A crucial visit to Syria by Russian President Dmitry Medvedev. Moscow wants to expand its influence in the Middle East. But does that put it on a collision course with Washington? And what does it mean for peace in the region? This is Inside Story. Hello, warm welcome to the programme. I'm Shuli Ghosh. For the first time, a Russian leader is visiting Syria. Dmitry Medvedev will meet Syrian President Bashar al-Assad in Damascus during a three-day visit to the region. Relations between the two countries had stalled after the collapse of the Soviet Union. But now Russia is hoping to play a broader role in the Middle East. Trade between Syria and Russia has grown to more than $2 billion in recent years. That's around 20% of Russia's total business with the Arab world. And that's likely to increase. In addition, the two presidents are expected to discuss a broad range of issues, including military cooperation, the Middle East conflict and regional security. It all highlights Russia's growing desire to expand its political role in the region. In an article published by Syrian newspaper Al-Watan, Medvedev called Damascus one of the most important political centres of the Middle East. Well, to discuss this, let me introduce our guests today. In Damascus, George Jabbour. He was an advisor to the former Syrian President Hafez al-Assad. In Moscow, Dmitry Babich. He's a political analyst with Russia Profile magazine. And in Washington, D.C., Ariel Cohen. He's a senior research fellow at the Heritage Foundation. Gentlemen, a warm welcome to all of you on the programme. George, let me start with you. Syria has welcomed this stronger role from Russia in the Middle East. Does it see Russia as a more natural ally, a more balancing force in the region than Washington?
Well, we have been seeing this since 1950. Back in 1950, the Prime Minister of Syria, a scholar of Islamic tendency, Dr. Dawalibi, mentioned that it is better for us perhaps to become a Soviet republic than to submit to the wishes of Israel, which is supported by the United States. So back in 1950, 60 years from now, we thought that counterbalancing the American influence in the region is a useful way to more or less offset the relationship, the alliance between Israel and the United States.
And in fact, the former president that you acted as an advisor to had very strong links with the Soviet Union, and in fact, the Soviets supplied the Syrian army with training and with weapons.
Yes, that's right. But then this policy did not start with the former president. It has been Syria's policy since 1955. We were supplied with Russian arms back in 1955. And then again, we don't forget that the Soviet Union at that time supported the Arab cause, supported Egypt in the aggression that was done by by Britain and France and Israel. So we had strong links with the Soviet Union back from 1955. But again in 1950, a great intellectual, Dr. Dawalibi, said that we should be allied to the Soviet Union against the alliance of Israel with the United States.
Dmitry, from the Russian point of view, how crucial is Syria for Russia's ambitions of expanding influence in the Middle East?
Well, Syria was the most reliable and the oldest ally in the region for the Soviet Union and later for Russia. Of course, we don't go that far as saying that Syria could become another Soviet republic. Mr. Dawalibi said it in 1950 when even inside Israel there were people like Moshe Sneh who thought that the Soviet Union could become the dominant power in the world. But certainly we want Syria to be an influential country, and we try to support Syria in its negotiations with Israel. And basically these negotiations are stalled right now, we know that. But Russia is a pretty unique opportunity for dialogue between Syria and Israel if that dialogue starts at some moment, because Russia is the only country that was visited in recent months by the whole array of political leaders from Israel and from other Arab countries, from Khaled Mashal to Avigdor Lieberman, the hawkish Israeli foreign minister. So basically Russia views itself as a very important negotiation platform. We don't have a lot of money, we don't have now a lot of weapons anymore. Russians cannot help Palestinians a lot financially. You know, actually the Russian aid to Palestinians is limited to about $10 million a year, a pretty negligible sum compared to the European Union or the United States. But we can be a very good negotiating platform.
Ariel, is that how Washington sees it? I know relations between Russia and Moscow and Washington have improved of late. Does Washington welcome this foray by Russia into the Middle East, or is that treading on Washington's toes?
Washington is pursuing what President Obama called the policy of a reset button, but in the framework of the reset, I'm sure President Obama expects Russia not to provide offensive weapons, and recently we heard that Syria is transferring Scud missiles to Hezbollah. Russia was very uncomfortable that anti-tank missiles Russia provided to Syria found their way to the hands of Hezbollah in the 2006 war. But Russia has other interests vis-a-vis Syria. It has a naval base in Tartus that it wants to expand. It is looking for avenues to engage the Arab world, and it's starting with Syria. But what George in Damascus said in the Soviet era, the Soviet Union was a superpower. Today, Syria is reaching out to Turkey, it's reaching out to Iran, and it is not closing the door on a dialogue with the European Union and the United States. So Russia has a tougher competition than in the Soviet era, and Russia cannot offer Syria the economic development path, a model that will pull Syria out of its economic morass. Syria is still largely a socialist country. Its free market is severely controlled by the Ba'ath Party. So in terms of economic development, Russia, which is essentially a producer of weapons and raw materials, is not a great shining light for Damascus.
OK, well, let's have a look at some of these relationships in more detail. The issue of the Golan Heights has left relations between Syria and Israel hostile for decades. Now, Israel has directly accused Syria of supplying long-range Scud missiles to Hezbollah in Lebanon, which Damascus denies. Syria also has strong ties with Iran, a relationship reaffirmed by President Ahmadinejad on a recent visit to Syria. Syria also believes it could have a role in Middle East peace negotiations, but it caused anger when it accused Israel of driving the region towards war. George, how do you think Israel views Russia's visit to Syria, given those recent accusations? Will Russia, for example, be bringing up this issue of weapons allegedly being given to Hezbollah?
Well, the Scud story was an Israeli story that was not confirmed even by the United States. It was a public relations stunt by an Israeli politician who told the Americans that he has information on that. The Americans said that they have no confirmation. Syria denied. So I think this issue is a dead issue.
Ariel doesn't agree with you. Ariel?
The Department confirmed. The State Department and the Defense Department confirmed missile transfers. They didn't use the word Scud, but they used the word destabilizing long-range missiles.
This sort of diplomatic language means some sort of retraction from what the Israeli politician said.
Just on that issue, Dmitry,
No,
I was going to ask whether Russia would raise this issue and whether it would seek assurances that weapons it's supplying to Syria won't find their way into the hands of perceived enemies.
Well, I'm sure if this issue is raised, it will be done secretly. I don't think that Mr. Medvedev will, in the open, say that basically Syria is abusing the agreements with Russia, because inside the contract that Russia signed, that Syria signed, when Russian weapons were supplied to Syria, it's written very clearly that these arms should not be passed to third parties, including, obviously, Hezbollah. But inside Russia, there is a discussion on that issue. Mikhail Margelov, the head of the International Department in the Council of Federation, one of the chambers of Russian parliament, said that he was very unhappy about rumors that basically Russian anti-tank weapons were used by Hezbollah in the 2006 war. So this is one view. But there are also other views inside the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, inside the State Duma. There are some people who say that basically since NATO doesn't buy our weapons and there is an unofficial ban on buying Russian weapons, we have no other choice but to sell it to other countries such as Syria. So it's a very debatable issue in Russia, but if Mr. Medvedev raises it in Damascus, I'm sure he will try not to do it in the open.
George, I'm wondering, I take your point that clearly Damascus has absolutely denied this link between Scud missiles and giving them to Hezbollah. But is the fact that the Russian president is visiting Syria, is that a message to Washington that it won't be intimidated?
Well, such a visit, of course, was scheduled a long time ago. The American renewal of sanctions against Syria is a new event. Of course, Russia has always been in the Middle East. Let's remember that Russia, the successor of the Soviet Union, is a co-sponsor of Resolution 338 of the Security Council, which more or less describes how to treat the Middle Eastern crisis. So Russia is a major player in the area. Russia is the power that is responsible for applying 338 together with the United States. Russia has been more honest in approaching how to implement 338 than the United States. And of course, we think that Russia is capable of exercising influence on the United States in order to bring the United States back to the spirit of 338 and 242.
OK, let's have a closer look at ties between the US and Syria. They've been tense since 2005, when Syria was accused of involvement in the assassination of former Lebanese Prime Minister Rafik Hariri. Now, since then, President Obama has tried to reopen diplomatic channels with Syria, but relations have once again turned frosty. In April, President Obama accused the Syrian government of provocative behaviour for allegedly supplying weapons to Hezbollah. This month, Obama renewed sanctions against Syria, saying it was still a threat to US security. The US has also accused Syria of not doing enough to stop foreign militants crossing the border into Iraq. Ariel, there seems to be a bit of a dance here between Syria and the US. The US reaches out to Syria, even went as far as naming a new ambassador to Syria, and Hillary Clinton sent some envoys over to Syria. And then now we have this situation where the US has renewed sanctions against Syria. What's going on here?
Well, Shuli, you did not mention probably the key thing in the years preceding President Obama's policy, and that is that the border between Syria and Iraq was open for a long time for radicals and terrorists to pour into Iraq via Syria to kill American soldiers. And that, of course, was making Syria a direct ally of al-Qaeda in Iraq. Now that President Obama wants to reach out to the Muslim world and to the Arab world, this issue may not be so upfront as it was during the Bush administration. The other issue is the Syrian connection to Iran. The reason Washington is reaching out to Damascus is to try to reorient Damascus away from Iran and to isolate Iran with its nuclear program. But as we heard from George, who advised the Assad family and advised the father, Hafez al-Assad, that Syria is not really interested in good relations with Washington. It is interested in a relationship with Russia to the extent it can get weapons from Russia. It is interested in improving relations with Turkey and Iran so that Syria can continue its policy of confrontation with Israel, of supporting terrorist organizations such as Hezbollah and Hamas. It harbors Hamas, and Hamas was recognized as a terrorist organization, not just by the Obama administration in the United States, but also by the European Union.
But when you talk about Syria's policy of confrontation with Israel, haven't there been? I mean, there have been moves, haven't there, for better relations between Israel and Syria, and that is something that Russia is hoping to assist.
Russia is trying to increase its influence in the Arab world, be it with moderate Arab countries like Egypt or the Gulf states. It is reaching out to Libya and now to Syria as well. The big problem for Russia, as my friend Dmitry Medvedev in Moscow pointed out, is if Syria buys more weapons, where the money for that weapons can come from. And that is a political issue for Damascus, because these airplanes and missiles cost tens and hundreds of billions of dollars that Syria just doesn't have. So it has an option of reaching out to Iran and asking the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, and President Ahmadinejad for money, or changing its orientation and asking Saudi Arabia for money. And senior Russian officials told me that the deal in which the Saudis may pay for the Syrian weapons is possible, but that will require an reorientation of the Assad regime away from Iran, and I don't think the Assad regime is ready for that. So Syria has a lot of dilemmas. President of Israel, President Peres, just visited Moscow, and according to the media, passed a message to Syria that if you're serious about peace, that Israel wants peace and doesn't want to escalate. If you're serious about that, stop providing weapons to Hezbollah. And we will see if Damascus is paying attention to the message that possibly President Medvedev is taking to his meeting with President Assad.
George, do you have a response to that?
Well, I would like to say first that we are interested in good relationship with the United States. I think that perhaps the United States has in its administration in some people who are not interested in good relationship with Syria. Look to the fact that President Obama said that he will send his ambassador back to Syria. He said it something like 1 year ago. Until now, he was unable to do it. So Syria, while it is interested in good relationship with the United States does not seem to be all in one mind regarding improving relationships with Syria. This is one. Now, second, there is a feeling in the area here that the resistance is a right which is enshrined by international law. Syria has an occupied territory. Lebanon has an occupied territory. The fact that the renewal of sanctions against Syria mentioned the threat to the United States security made people rather laugh here in this part of the world. We are a threat to the U.S. security. Is that true? And the United States, while our land is occupied by the ally of the United States,
the U.S. perceives Hezbollah to be a threat to U.S. security, and certainly to Israel's security. And if Syria is supplying weapons,
Hezbollah is defending Lebanon, is resisting from Lebanon, and he is resisting any aggression that Israel unleashes on Lebanon. So Hezbollah did not attack Israel except when there was an Israeli aggression against Lebanon. There are certain things.
There's no Israeli aggression against Lebanon. I'm sorry.
That have to be. I think that certainly the right of Hezbollah to resist aggression is enshrined in international law.
What aggression?
And we have to know. We have to know.
Israel does not occupy Lebanese territory. I'm sorry.
Yes,
oh, come on.
The Lebanese airplanes were over Lebanon every day, continue to be over Lebanon every day. Israel aggressed Lebanon back in 2006, and Israel is the aggressor.
2006 was provoked.
I think we're getting slightly off topic here. Dmitry, this is the kind of morass that Russia is wading into.
Yes, yes. You know, I would I would like to return a little bit to Medvedev's visit. I would just say that Russia is interested in peace in the Middle East and in Iran. Because if there is a war in Iran, Russia will be the first to suffer. There is a big Azerbaijani minority in Iran, and Azerbaijan is one of the former Soviet republics, pretty unstable and bordering Iran and Russia. So the last thing Russia wants to happen is another war of the United States against Iran, and or another conflict in the Middle East. So certainly when Russia provides weapons to Syria, it will do it for money, I think, this time. Here I agree with Ariel. We used to provide arms to Syria for credit, and basically there was a huge debt, I think about $11 billion, which was written off a couple of years ago by Russia. Okay. But basically, I don't quite agree with Ariel that Syria can reach out to Saudi Arabia and to Turkey. I would remind you of the fact that about 10 years ago, in 1999, Syria was very close to war with Turkey because Turkey wanted Kurdish leader Öcalan out of Syria.
But listen,
so,
let's just
basically, I don't think that's possible.
Let's just go back to this issue of Iran, because that's very interesting. The close relationship between Iran and Syria has caused concern in both the US and Israel. The two countries share religious ties, with the ruling elite in both nations coming from a Shia background. In February, Iran's President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad visited Syria to reaffirm the close relations between the two, and Syria has constantly backed a diplomatic solution to Iran's nuclear program instead of sanctions. Dmitry, is there? I know that the US is hoping to sort of prize Syria and Iran away from each other. Is that a position Russia agrees with, because it also has strong ties with Iran?
Russia wants to have strong ties with both Iran and Syria, and Russia doesn't want Iran to have a military nuclear program, period. That's pretty easy, and I think that basically Russia, Medvedev during his visit in Damascus, he will try to, to dissuade Syria from any radical action, because basically, as Ariel said, yes, maybe Syria allowed some fighters into Iraq when the United States forces were there, but I think it's understandable, bearing in mind that in 2003, when American troops entered Iraq, there was a lot of voices in Washington that Syria would be next. So after pacifying Iraq, American troops would move to Syria. So I think Syrian reaction was quite understandable when that happened.
Okay, very quick last one to George. Bashar al-Assad has queried how Washington can talk about stability in the region and then try to divide two countries. Is Syria likely to move away from Iran?
Well, I suppose, let us talk about President Medvedev's visit. I suppose this visit is very important. Russia has quite a role to play in making peace in the Middle East. Russia is a rational actor in Middle Eastern politics and internationally, more rational in this regard than the United States. The United States, its rationality is subjugated to the alliance, her alliance with Israel. I think that President Medvedev will benefit the general feeling of relaxation in this area after Israel and the United States exchanged threats against Syria and so forth.
Okay, gentlemen, we're going to have to leave it there. We've run out of time. Thank you, all of you, very much indeed for joining us. George Jabor, Dmitry Babic and Ariel Cohen. And thank you for joining us on this edition of Inside Story. Bye-bye for now.